She woke up tangled in silk sheets, a 4-carat diamond weighing down her left hand, and a man she didn't recognize watching her from the window. Rebecca Austin didn't know his name, but he knew hers, and he claimed she was his wife. It began with champagne and ended in a blood-stained vow. Rebecca Austin thought she was in Paris for an art show. Instead, she woke up married to a mafia boss, and what Santino Lazzari told her next would rewrite everything she believed about freedom, control, and herself. But the moment she tried to leave was when the real story began. Would you stay married to a stranger, if that stranger was powerful enough to protect you from the people trying to kill him? For Rebecca, it wasn't a fantasy, it was survival. This is a story about danger, desire, and the price of saying yes. Before we dive in, where are you watching from, and what kind of story do you want to see next? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in and don't let go, go ahead, hit subscribe. I have another powerful one coming tomorrow. Now let's get into the story. The light came first, soft, golden, filtering through sheer curtains that moved like ghosts in the breeze. Rebecca's head throbbed with the kind of pain that suggested poor decisions and expensive alcohol. Her mouth tasted like regret and something sweeter. Champagne, maybe. Or lies. She blinked slowly, trying to place herself in space and time. The ceiling above her was decorated with ornate molding, the kind you only saw in old Parisian buildings or museums. The sheets beneath her fingers were Egyptian cotton, cool and impossibly soft. This wasn't her hostel. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. And then she felt it, weight on her left hand. Rebecca lifted her arm slowly, squinting against the morning light, and froze. A diamond ring sat on her fourth finger, a massive, brilliant-cut stone that caught the sunlight and threw it back in sharp, accusatory flashes. 4 carats, easily. Maybe more. The band was platinum, delicate but unmistakably expensive. Her breath caught in her throat. No. She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. The silk sheets, blood-red, she noticed with growing horror, pooled around her waist. She was wearing a slip she didn't recognize, the fabric clinging to her skin like a second layer of confusion. Her camera bag sat in the corner, her boots beside it, but everything else about this room screamed wrong. Where was she? The answer came from the window. "Good morning, Rebecca." Her head snapped toward the voice. A man stood there, backlit by the Parisian skyline, a silhouette of broad shoulders and controlled stillness. He was tall, dressed in black despite the morning light, and he held a coffee cup like it was a weapon he'd chosen not to use yet. "Or should I say," he continued, his accent rolling through the words like smoke, "Mrs. Lazzari." Rebecca's heart stopped. Then it started again, too fast, too loud. "What?" Her voice came out strangled. "What did you just say?" The man turned, and for the first time, she saw his face. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression she made, a jaw that suggested he didn't smile often and didn't need to. Tattoos crawled up his forearms, disappearing beneath rolled sleeves, intricate, deliberate, the kind that told stories she probably didn't want to hear. He looked like trouble wearing a custom suit. "You heard me." He took a sip of his coffee, unhurried. "You're my wife. As of approximately 2:47 this morning, French Standard Time." The room tilted. "I don't." Rebecca scrambled backward, the sheets tangling around her legs. "I don't know you." Santino Lazzari. He set the cup down on a side table with a soft clink. "And you do know me. You just don't remember." Her pulse hammered in her ears. This had to be a joke. A setup. Some elaborate prank orchestrated by someone from the gallery opening last night. She'd been at an exhibition in the Marais, covering it for a travel magazine. There had been wine conversation, a handsome stranger who'd asked about her camera. Oh God, was this him? "This isn't funny," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "Whatever this is, it's not a joke." Santino moved away from the window, and she noticed how he walked, smooth, predatory, like someone who'd learned long ago that hesitation got you killed. "You're in my penthouse. You're wearing my grandmother's ring. And according to French civil law, you became my wife 9 hours ago." Rebecca looked down at the ring again, and this time, her stomach dropped. It wasn't costume jewelry. It wasn't even close. This was real. Heavy. Old. The kind of heirloom that carried weight beyond carats. "I would remember getting married," she whispered. "You were drunk." "I don't get that drunk." "Last night you did." He stopped a few feet from the bed, maintaining distance but radiating a presence that made the massive room feel suddenly small. "You had 3 glasses of Dom Perignon at the gallery, 2 cocktails at Le Comptoir, and a shot of Limoncello you insisted on because you said it reminded you of Capri." Her blood turned cold. He was right. She had said that. She remembered the Limoncello. She remembered laughing about something. She remembered. Nothing after that. Who are you? Rebecca's voice cracked. Really? Who are you? Santino Lazzari smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm the man you married, Amore. And I'm the man who's about to explain exactly what that means. Outside the window, Notre Dame rose against the morning sky, beautiful and indifferent. Paris hummed below, the city of love, the city of light, the city where Rebecca Austin had apparently made the worst decision of her life. And she couldn't remember a single second of it. She backed away instinctively, the sheets still twisted around her legs like silk restraints. Every instinct Rebecca had honed over years of traveling alone, of navigating dangerous streets with nothing but a camera and her wits, screamed at her to run. But her boots were across the room, and he was between her and the door. I don't believe you. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Marriage certificates take time. Paperwork. Witnesses. You can't just. In France you can. Santino reached into his pocket, and Rebecca flinched. He noticed, and something flickered across his face. Not quite offense, but close. He pulled out a phone instead of a weapon. If you know the right people. Who are you? I told you. Santino Lazzari. He said it like the name should mean something. Like she should be impressed or terrified or both. My family has had interests in Paris for 3 generations. Interests. The word hung in the air like a threat wrapped in diplomacy. Rebecca's journalist brain, even through the panic and hangover, cataloged details. The expensive penthouse, the casual mention of influential connections, the tattoos that looked more like family crests than art, the way he carried himself like someone accustomed to violence and immunity in equal measure. Oh no. She couldn't say it. Didn't want to say it. Mafia. Santino's smile was sharp. Such an ugly word. I prefer businessman with traditional values. This couldn't be happening. Rebecca had photographed war zones, refugee camps, protests that turned into riots. She'd been held at gunpoint twice and talked her way out both times. But this? Waking up married to a crime boss in a Parisian penthouse? This was a new circle of hell. Prove it, she said suddenly. Prove we're married. Because I don't remember any of it, and without proof, this is just kidnapping with better interior design. For the first time, Santino looked almost impressed. You're braver than you look. Show me the proof, or let me leave. He studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes weighing something she couldn't name. Then he tapped his phone screen and turned it toward her. Press play. Rebecca's hand shook as she took the phone. The screen showed a paused video, the thumbnail image grainy but unmistakable. Her in white, laughing at something off camera. Her finger hovered over the play button. Don't watch it. If you don't see it, it's not real. But she'd built a career on bearing witness to uncomfortable truths. So she pressed play. The video started in what looked like a small, elegant office. All dark wood and brass fixtures. Rebecca watched herself stumble slightly, giggling, steadied by a hand she now recognized. Santino's hand. Are you sure? His voice asked from off-screen. Video Rebecca looked directly at the camera, at him, with eyes that were bright, dilated, definitely drunk but not unconscious. Not coerced. Just reckless. I've never been more sure of anything, she heard herself say. Let's do it. Tonight or never. I want the story. What story? An older man appeared in the frame, thin, official-looking, wearing a sash that marked him as someone with legal authority. He spoke in French, rapid but clear, asking questions Rebecca couldn't quite track. But her video self nodded enthusiastically, said we in all the right places, and when the official slid papers across the desk, she signed them, her own signature. Clear. Unmistakable. Legally binding. No, Rebecca whispered. The video continued. Santino placed the diamond ring on her finger. She kissed him. Deeply, laughing against his mouth like this was the best adventure she'd ever had. Like she was choosing this. Turn it off. Her voice cracked. There's more. Turn it off. Santino took the phone back, and the video disappeared. But the damage was done. Rebecca had seen enough. She'd been conscious. Willing. Enthusiastic, even. The French legal system wouldn't see coercion in that footage. They'd see consent. I was drunk, she said weakly. French law doesn't care if you were drunk, Santino replied, not unkindly. Only if you were unconscious or visibly incapacitated. You were neither. You walked in on your own. You said the vows. You signed the documents. He paused. You were very clear about wanting access to my world for a photography project. The room started spinning again, but this time it had nothing to do with alcohol. I wanted the story. Oh God, she'd done this. She'd actually married a mobster for access. For photographs. for the kind of exclusive documentation that could make a career. Drunk Rebecca had gambled with sober Rebecca's entire life. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It is." Santino moved closer, but stopped when she tensed. "But here's what you need to understand. I'm not keeping you prisoner. You're free to leave. File for annulment. Pretend this never happened." Hope flared in her chest. "Really? Really?" He picked up his coffee again, studying her over the rim. "But if you do, you'll miss the opportunity of a lifetime." "What opportunity?" "The deal you proposed last night." Santino's smile was dangerous now. Calculated. 6 months. Stay married to me. Publicly. Convincingly. Attend the events I need you at. Play the role of my wife. "Why would I?" "Because I'll pay you 500,000 euros, he said simply. "And I'll give you something no other journalist has ever had. Complete access to document parts of my world. Not all of it, but enough to build a career that matters." Rebecca's breath caught. €500,000. And the story of a lifetime. It was insane. Dangerous. Probably illegal in 17 different ways. And she could feel herself considering it. "You're insane," she said. "I'm practical." Santino set down the coffee cup with finality. "I need a wife who's outside the family. Someone with credibility. Someone who can stand beside me during certain legal proceedings. You need money and access. It's a business arrangement." "A business arrangement," Rebecca repeated numbly. "For 6 months. 6 months. Then we quietly divorce, you take your money and your photographs, and we both get what we want." "And if I say no?" Santino shrugged. "Then I'll have my lawyer begin annulment proceedings this afternoon. You'll walk away with nothing but a hangover and a story you can't print without sounding crazy." He paused. "But I don't think you'll say no." "Why not?" He moved to the window again, silhouetted against Paris. "Because you're a journalist. And you're already wondering what other secrets I'm keeping." He was right. God help her, he was right. Rebecca's hands were still shaking. She couldn't stop replaying what she'd seen, herself in that video, so confident, so reckless. The white dress had been simple, elegant, the kind of thing you grabbed off a boutique rack at midnight because the moment felt magical. Or insane. "Show me again," she heard herself say. Santino raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I need to see it. All of it." He considered this, then handed her the phone. "Don't delete anything. That's the only copy you're getting." Rebecca took it with trembling fingers and pressed play from the beginning. This time, she forced herself to watch differently. Not as the horrified woman in silk sheets, but as the photojournalist who documented human trafficking rings in Thailand and political corruption in Buenos Aires. She watched like she was analyzing evidence. The video was time-stamped, 2:31 a.m. The office was small but appointed with the kind of understated luxury that screamed old money. The official wore a tricolor sash, definitely legitimate, probably deeply in someone's pocket. And there she was. Video Rebecca wore a white slip dress that looked expensive. Her hair was loose, messier than she usually wore it, and her makeup was smudged at the corners. But her eyes, though bright with alcohol, were focused. She was laughing at something Santino said off camera. "Are you absolutely certain?" the official asked in French. "This is legally binding, Mademoiselle Austin." "Madame Lazari," Video Rebecca corrected, giggling. "And yes, God yes. This is perfect. He's perfect. Tonight or never, right?" She turned to Santino, grabbed his face with both hands. "Let's do it tonight or never." Rebecca's stomach dropped. Those words. She'd said those exact words. The ceremony was brief. French civil marriages always were. Questions asked, answers given. 2 witnesses she didn't recognize stood in the background, their faces carefully neutral. When the official asked if she took Santino Lazari as her lawfully wedded husband, Video Rebecca didn't hesitate. "Oui." Then came the papers. The official spread them across the desk with practiced efficiency, pointing to signature lines. Video Rebecca leaned over, squinting slightly, and signed her name with a flourish. Once, twice, 3 times, each signature identical to the one on her passport. Legally binding, irrevocably real. "No," Present Rebecca whispered, but the video continued. Santino produced the ring, that massive, beautiful diamond, and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Video Rebecca stared at it like she'd won the lottery, then launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We did it," she breathed against his mouth. "I can't believe we actually did it. Are you going to remember this in the morning?" Santino's voice held a trace of something. Concern? Amusement? Both. "I'll remember everything," Video Rebecca promised, then kissed him deeply, hungrily, like a woman who'd just made the best decision of her life. The video ended. Rebecca stared at the blank screen, her reflection ghostly in the black glass. The room had stopped spinning, but something worse had replaced the vertigo: certainty. "I was drunk," she said, but even she heard how weak it sounded. Santino took the phone back. "You were drunk," he agreed. "But French law doesn't care about drunk. It cares about capacity. Were you conscious?" "Yes." "Could you speak clearly?" "Yes." "Did you sign the documents?" Rebecca closed her eyes. "Yes." "Then you were legally capable of consent. You said the vows. You signed the papers. You put on the ring." His voice dropped, became something darker. "Whether you remember it or not, Rebecca Austin, you're mine now. Mrs. Lazari." The way he said it sent ice through her veins. "Not with me. Not married to me. But mine. Like she was a possession. An asset. Something acquired." "For 6 months," she shot back, finding her spine again. "You said 6 months. If you agree to the deal." Santino moved to a chair near the window and sat, completely at ease, like they were discussing a business merger and not her entire life. "But first, you should understand what you got yourself into." "You mean what drunk me got sober me into?" "Semantics." He gestured to the wardrobe. "There are clothes in there. Your size. Get dressed. We should talk properly, and I'd rather not negotiate with a woman in her undergarments. It's distracting." Heat flooded Rebecca's face. She'd almost forgotten she was wearing nothing but the blood-red slip. She clutched the sheets tighter. "Turn around. I've already seen." "Turn. Around." Something in her voice made him comply. Santino turned his chair toward the window, and Rebecca scrambled out of bed, diving for the wardrobe. Inside, she found casual clothes in exactly her size: jeans, soft sweaters, even a leather jacket. At the bottom, her own messenger bag sat waiting, her camera inside. He'd planned this. All of it. She dressed quickly, her mind racing. When she was decent, jeans, a black sweater, her boots, she cleared her throat. "You can look now." Santino turned back. His eyes swept over her once, assessing. "Better. Now sit." "I'd rather stand." "Sit, Rebecca. Or I'll have my lawyers start annulment proceedings right now, and you can spend the rest of your life wondering what story you missed." The threat landed exactly where he'd aimed it. Rebecca's fatal flaw, her journalistic curiosity, the part of her that had dragged her into war zones and disaster areas, perked up like a dog hearing its name. "What story?" She sat. "Good." Santino leaned back, fingers steepled. "Now, let me tell you what happened last night. All of it. Not just the parts the video shows." Rebecca's heart hammered. "I'm listening." "You came to the gallery opening in the Marais. You were covering it for some travel magazine. Departures, I think. Condé Nast Traveler." "Right. You were photographing a sculpture when I approached you. We talked about art, about Rome, about the way light falls differently in every city." He paused. "You told me you were chasing authentic stories. Real ones. The kind that make people uncomfortable." That did sound like her. "We had drinks. Several. You were charming, passionate about your work. You said you were tired of surface-level stories, that you wanted access to something real. Something dangerous." His smile was sharp. "I told you I could give you that. And drunk me thought marrying a mobster was the solution? Drunk you thought becoming my wife would open doors no other journalist could access. You said, and I quote, 'This is the story of a lifetime.'" Santino's eyes locked onto hers. "You were right." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Rebecca's mind spun through possibilities. Photos of organized crime from the inside. Documentation that could win awards, change careers, maybe even change laws. It was every investigative journalist's fantasy. It was also probably a death sentence. "Why would you agree to this?" she asked. "Why would you want a journalist documenting your life?" "Because I don't need a journalist," Santino said quietly. "I need a wife. And you, Rebecca Austin, are exactly the kind of wife I can use." The word used cut through the air like a blade. "Explain." "Later. First, you need to decide." He stood, towering over her even from across the room. 6 months. Play the role. I'll pay you 500,000 euros and give you controlled access to photograph my world. After that, we divorce quietly, and you walk away with money and a portfolio that will make your career. And if I refuse, then this marriage never happened. I'll handle the annulment. You'll fly back to whatever hostel you're staying in, and in a month, you'll wonder if this was all a dream. He paused. "But you won't refuse. You sound very sure. Because I know your type, amore. You're already calculating the angles. Already wondering what you could capture. What truths you could expose." Santino moved toward the door. "I'll give you 1 hour to decide. There's coffee in the kitchen, breakfast if you're hungry. But when I come back, I need an answer." He stopped at the threshold, hand on the doorframe. "Choose wisely, Mrs. Lazari. This story could make you, or it could bury you." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Rebecca sat alone in the luxury penthouse, a stranger's ring burning on her finger, and the most dangerous decision of her life waiting to be made. What would you choose? The story of a lifetime, or your safety? Drop your answer below. Rebecca sat frozen for exactly 30 seconds after the door closed. Then her hands moved on autopilot, reaching for her camera bag. She pulled out her Leica, the one she'd bought in Berlin with money from her first major publication, and checked it methodically. Battery full. Memory card empty, freshly formatted. No damage. He'd taken care of it. Even her equipment. The thought should have comforted her. Instead, it made her skin crawl. This level of attention to detail meant planning. Premeditation. Santino Lazari hadn't drunkenly married a random woman at a gallery opening. He'd orchestrated this. But why? Rebecca moved through the penthouse like she was documenting a crime scene, which in a way, she was. The living room was minimalist but expensive, leather furniture, abstract art that was probably original, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a Paris she'd barely recognized from this height. In the kitchen, she found an espresso machine that cost more than her rent and a breakfast spread that looked catered. Croissants, fruit, cheese, preserves in tiny glass jars. Her stomach growled despite everything. She poured coffee with shaking hands and forced herself to think. 6 months. 500,000 euros. Access to document a Mafia family from the inside. It was insane. Journalists had died for less. But journalists had also won Pulitzers for less. Rebecca pulled out her phone, miraculously still in her bag, fully charged, and opened her banking app. The balance made her wince. 347 euros. Barely enough for another week in Paris, let alone the flight back to London. Her last 3 pitches had been rejected, and the Condé Nast payment wouldn't arrive for another month. She was broke. Again. This was the cycle she'd lived for 5 years. Pitch, shoot, submit, wait. Scrape by on hostel beds and black coffee. Chase stories that mattered while watching colleagues with rich parents or trust funds coast into editorial positions she'd never be offered. 500,000 euros would change everything. She could pay off her student loans. Buy equipment that didn't require prayer and luck to function. Rent an actual apartment instead of subletting rooms from strangers. Take assignments based on importance instead of desperation. This is the story of a lifetime. Drunk Rebecca had been right about that, at least. But Drunk Rebecca hadn't considered what happened when you got too close to monsters. When you documented evil, and it started documenting you back. When the story consumed you instead of the other way around. Rebecca had seen it happen. In Karachi, a journalist friend had embedded with a gang for a documentary. He'd gotten his footage. He'd also gotten a bullet in the spine and spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. In Colombia, another colleague had infiltrated a cartel. Her exposé had won awards. Her family had needed witness protection for 3 years. This wasn't like photographing refugees or protests. Those people wanted their stories told. Santino Lazari wasn't offering her access out of altruism. He wanted something. I need a wife. And you, Rebecca Austin, are exactly the kind of wife I can use. Use for what? Rebecca moved to the window, coffee cup warming her cold hands. Notre Dame rose in the distance, and beyond it, Paris sprawled in every direction, beautiful, indifferent, full of secrets. Somewhere down there was the hostel where her backpack waited. The gallery where she'd made the worst decision of her life. The normal world she could return to if she just said no. But when had she ever chosen normal? She dropped out of a comfortable university program to chase stories in uncomfortable places. She turned down a staff position at a regional paper to stay freelance, to stay mobile, to stay free. Every safe choice had felt like suffocation. And now she was wearing a ring that could fund a year of her life, standing in a penthouse she'd married into, holding a decision that could define her career. Her fatal flaw whispered, think of the photographs. The access alone was unprecedented. Crime families didn't let outsiders in, let alone journalists with cameras. If Santino actually gave her what he promised, even controlled access, she could document something no one else ever had. The human side of organized crime. The rituals, the hierarchy, the moments of vulnerability that made monsters into men. It would be groundbreaking, dangerous, probably award-winning. It would also be 6 months of her life, chained to a man she didn't know, playing a role she'd never auditioned for. But you already auditioned, the voice reminded her. Drunk you passed the test. Sober you just has to survive it. Rebecca checked her phone again. No messages. Her editor hadn't even noticed she'd gone silent. Her family, scattered across 3 continents and barely speaking, wouldn't miss her. She had friends, but none close enough to raise alarms if she disappeared into a marriage for half a year. She was alone in this decision. Completely, terrifyingly alone. Which meant the choice was entirely hers. What would make a better story? She thought bitterly. I fled a mafia marriage, or I documented the mob from the inside? One was a victim narrative. The other was journalism. Rebecca drained her coffee and set the cup down with more force than necessary. The sound echoed through the pristine kitchen. Fine. If she was going to do this, and some reckless part of her already knew she would, she needed terms. Boundaries. A contract that protected her beyond just money. She wasn't drunk now. And this time, she'd negotiate sober. Rebecca found paper and a pen in a drawer, expensive stationery, of course, and started writing. Questions she needed answered. Protections she required. Lines that couldn't be crossed. By the time the door opened again, she had a full page of demands. Santino entered without knocking, because apparently this was his penthouse, and she was just living in it. He looked at the paper in her hand and smiled slightly. You're going to say yes. I'm going to negotiate, Rebecca corrected. If you want me to do this, we're doing it properly. With terms. I'm listening. She stood, meeting his eyes even though he had 6 inches on her. First, I want the money in escrow. Half up front, half when we divorce. Non-negotiable. Reasonable. Second, I control what gets photographed and published. You can review for security concerns, but I maintain editorial control. Santino's expression didn't change. Within limits. Third, separate bedrooms. This is a business arrangement, not a real marriage. Of course. That was too easy. Rebecca narrowed her eyes. Fourth, I walk away the second I feel unsafe. No questions, no penalties. Define unsafe. If you threaten me. If your enemies threaten me. If I'm asked to do anything illegal. I leave, and I keep whatever money I've earned up to that point. Santino considered this. Agreed. With one condition. What? You don't publish anything about me or my family until after the divorce. You can photograph, you can document, but nothing goes public for 6 months. Rebecca's journalist instincts screamed, but her survival instincts whispered that this was fair. Agreed. Anything else? Yes. Santino moved closer, and she fought the urge to retreat. In public, you're my wife. Affectionate, convincing, loyal. No one can suspect this is an arrangement. That means dinners, events, physical contact when necessary. Define physical contact. Hand-holding. A kiss on the cheek. Maybe more if the situation demands it. But nothing you're not comfortable with. His eyes bore into hers. I need a wife who can sell the illusion, Rebecca. Can you do that? Could she? Pretend to love a man she'd met hours ago? Smile at mafia bosses over dinner? Stand beside someone who probably had blood on his hands? For 500,000 euros and the story of a lifetime? Yes, Rebecca heard herself say. I can do that. Santino smiled then, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. Then we have a deal, Mrs. Lazari. He extended his hand. Rebecca looked at it, at the tattoos that marked him as something other, at the scars that suggested violence survived. Then she shook it. 6 months, she said firmly. 6 months, he agreed. And just like that, Rebecca Austin sold herself into a mafia marriage, armed with nothing but a camera and the desperate hope that she'd survive long enough to tell the story. The first week, Rebecca kept her distance. She moved into the guest suite, a bedroom larger than her entire London flat, with its own bathroom and a view of the Seine that should have been romantic but felt like a gilded cage. She documented everything through her lens, keeping the camera between herself and reality. Santino at breakfast, reading Le Monde with the same intensity other men reserved for murder. Click. His bodyguard Marco checking sight lines before they left the building. Click. The way Santino's jaw tightened when his phone rang with certain numbers. Click, click, click. She was clinical. Professional. She told herself this was just another assignment. But by the second week, something shifted. It started small. Santino brought her coffee every morning. Perfectly prepared, 2 sugars, exactly how she liked it even though she'd never told him. He noticed when she rubbed her neck after editing photos for hours and left ibuprofen on her desk without comment. When she mentioned missing her favorite bakery in the Marais, fresh croissants from that exact shop appeared the next morning. You're trying to bribe me with pastries, she accused. I'm trying to make sure my wife doesn't starve, he replied, not looking up from his newspaper. There's a difference. My wife. The words still felt strange, but less terrifying than before. The meetings came next. Santino had warned her, Certain events required her presence. She'd agreed, but seeing it in practice was different. The first was dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a name, just an address wealthy people whispered to each other. 8 men in expensive suits, their wives dripping in diamonds that could fund small countries. And Rebecca, the outsider, wearing a dress Santino had somehow acquired in her exact size. "Smile," he'd murmured before they entered. "And remember, you love me desperately." She'd expected violence, threats, the kind of obvious criminality that made good photographs and better evidence. Instead, she got coded conversations about shipping delays and supply chain issues. Handshakes that lasted too long. Envelopes that changed hands under tables. Nothing overtly illegal, but everything deeply wrong. Rebecca photographed what she could with her phone, hidden shots that would never hold up in court but might tell a story. But as the evening wore on, something else caught her attention. The way Santino's hand rested on her lower back, possessive but protective. How he steered conversations away from her when questions got too personal. The moment one of the men made a crude joke and Santino's entire demeanor changed, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "Respect my wife or leave." The man apologized immediately. Later, in the car ride home, Rebecca stared at Santino's profile in the passing streetlights. "You didn't have to defend me. It was just a joke." It wasn't funny. His knuckles were white on his knee. "And you're not just anyone. You're mine to protect." The possessiveness should have angered her. Instead, it made her stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. By week 3, Rebecca's camera captured things she hadn't intended. Santino laughing at something Marco said, his whole face transforming. The careful way he touched an old photograph of a woman who must have been his mother. How he fed a stray cat that appeared on their balcony, leaving out food like he was ashamed to be caught caring. One night, she found him in his study, surrounded by papers. He looked exhausted, older than his 34 years. "What are you working on?" she asked from the doorway. "Legal issues. Boring corporate restructuring." He rubbed his eyes. "You should sleep. So should you." In a minute, Rebecca hesitated, then crossed the room and set down a cup of tea she'd made. "2 sugars," she said. "The way you like it." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. He'd been paying attention to her. She'd been paying attention to him. This wasn't the story she'd expected to document. "Thank you," Santino said quietly. Rebecca fled before she could do something stupid like stay. But she was losing her objectivity. The photographs proved it. Every image of Santino showed more humanity, less monster. The way he listened when his sister Gianna called, his voice softening into something almost gentle. How he'd stopped a car in traffic to help an elderly woman with her groceries, refusing thanks. The criminal empire existed. She wasn't naive enough to deny that. But the man running it was complicated in ways that made her journalist instinct scream warnings while her heart whispered something far more dangerous. She was starting to see him as human, and humans were so much harder to expose. 1 month in, Rebecca sat in her room reviewing photographs, trying to sort them into categories: evidence, context, personal. The personal folder kept growing, filled with images that would never make it into any publication because they showed something she hadn't expected to find. A man capable of tenderness, of protection, of looking at her like she mattered beyond the deal they'd made. Rebecca closed her laptop, her chest tight. 6 months suddenly felt both too long and not long enough. What would you do in Rebecca's position? Stay objective or give in to what you're feeling? Drop your thoughts below. The truth came on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks into their arrangement. Rebecca had spent the afternoon photographing the Père Lachaise cemetery, needing distance from the penthouse and the complicated feelings it contained. When she returned, wet from unexpected rain, she found Santino in the living room with a woman she'd never seen before. Tall, elegant, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Rebecca's camera equipment. She had the kind of beauty that came from money and confidence in equal measure, and the way she looked at Santino suggested history. "Rebecca." Santino stood immediately. "This is Isabel Moro, my lawyer." "Former lover," Isabel corrected with a sharp smile, extending her hand. "But yes, currently lawyer." "Isabel." Rebecca shook her hand, feeling suddenly underdressed in her rain-soaked jeans. "Rebecca Austin." "Lazari," Santino corrected quietly. "Rebecca Lazari." Isabel's eyes flickered with something: surprise? Disapproval? But her smile never wavered. "Of course. Congratulations on your marriage." "So unexpected." The word hung in the air like an accusation. "I should let you finish your meeting," Rebecca said, already backing toward her room. "Actually," Isabel said, "this concerns you." Rebecca froze. Santino's jaw tightened in a way she'd learned meant he was angry, but controlling it. Isabel. She should know, Santino. Wives usually do. Isabel opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Especially wives who were selected for very specific reasons. The floor seemed to tilt. What? Santino stood, his whole body tense. Isabel, that's enough. Is it? The lawyer's voice was sharp. Because I've spent 6 weeks covering your tracks, managing the paperwork, and ensuring this arrangement holds up under scrutiny. The least you could do is be honest with her about why she's really here. Rebecca's heart hammered. Santino. He looked at her then, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. Guilt. That's what she saw. Clear, undeniable guilt. Tell me, Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. Right now. Isabel started to speak, but Santino cut her off with a look that could have drawn blood. Leave. I'll handle this. Your funeral, Isabel said lightly, but she gathered her things. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Madame Lazari, you were exactly what he needed, whether you knew it or not. The door closed. Silence filled the space like poison gas. Sit down, Santino said. No. Rebecca's hands were shaking, so she crossed her arms. Just tell me. Whatever it is, just say it. He poured himself a drink, whiskey neat, and downed it in one swallow. When he finally spoke, he didn't look at her. I didn't meet you by accident at the gallery. The words landed like blows. What? I'd been watching you for 3 months. His voice was flat, factual. Since your exposé on the Marseille trafficking ring, the one that got 2 politicians arrested. Rebecca's mind raced backward. That article. It had been her breakthrough piece, published in The Guardian. She'd been proud of it. Why? Because you were perfect. Santino finally met her eyes. American photojournalist with credentials. No criminal record. No family connections to organized crime. Liberal politics, humanitarian awards, the kind of reputation that makes prosecutors nervous about looking too closely. You needed a wife, Rebecca whispered, pieces clicking into place. Someone clean. I needed an alibi. The words were brutal in their honesty. The French government has been building a case against my family for 2 years. They have witnesses' testimony, enough to make charges stick. But a marriage to someone like you, someone with international credibility, complicates things. Makes me look legitimate, domestic, reformed. You were using me. I was using everyone. Santino's smile was bitter. It's what I do, Rebecca. It's all I know how to do. She felt like she'd been punched. All those small kindnesses, the coffee, the protection, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. Had it all been manipulation? A con played by an expert? The gallery wasn't an accident, she said, working through it. You knew I'd be there. I bought 3 of your photographs through an intermediary. Made sure they'd be displayed. Ensured you'd get the invitation. The drinks. Getting me drunk. I made sure the bartender kept your glass full. His voice cracked slightly. But I didn't force you to drink them, Rebecca. And I didn't force you to say yes. You orchestrated it. Her voice rose, months of confusion and attraction curdling into rage. You manipulated everything so I'd think it was my choice. It was your choice. Santino moved toward her, and she retreated. He stopped, something flickering across his face. You wanted access to my world. You said yes to the deal. I just ensured we'd meet in the first place. Oh well, that makes it so much better. Her laugh was sharp, broken. You stalked me for months, engineered our meeting, got me drunk, and convinced me to marry you. But sure, I chose it. I needed you, he said quietly. And you needed money and a story. We both got what we wanted. Did we? Rebecca's eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Because I wanted truth, Santino. I wanted to document something real. But this was just another con. Not all of it. He stepped forward again, and this time she held her ground. The deal was strategy. The marriage was necessity. But everything after, he stopped, jaw working. Everything else was real. I don't believe you. Then don't. His voice turned hard. But you signed the contract, Rebecca. 6 months. The money's already in escrow. You can hate me all you want, but you're still my wife until December. The word wife felt like glass in her throat. Were there others? Other women you considered? Santino was silent for a long moment. Then, 4. You were the 5th option. But after I saw you work, how you got sources to trust you, how you made them feel seen. He shook his head. It had to be you. Rebecca backed toward her room, needing distance, needing air. Stay away from me. Rebecca. I mean it, Santino. Whatever this was, whatever you think we were becoming, it's over. I'll fulfill the contract because I'm not stupid enough to walk away from 500,000 euros. But don't touch me. Don't talk to me unless it's about appearances. We're done. She slammed her bedroom door and locked it, sliding down to sit with her back against the wood. Her whole body shook. She'd been so careful. Built walls, kept distance, maintained objectivity. But somewhere between the morning coffee and the protective touches, between documenting his world and seeing his humanity, she'd started to fall for him. And it had all been calculated, planned, a role he'd played perfectly because he'd studied her for months and knew exactly which strings to pull. Rebecca had photographed war criminals and cartel leaders. She'd documented human trafficking and political corruption. She'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. But Santino Lazzari had done something worse than violence. He'd made her believe he might be worth saving. And that, she realized, was the cruelest con of all. Rebecca didn't leave her room for 2 days. She worked through her photographs, deleting anything that made Santino look human. The laugh lines around his eyes when Marco told bad jokes, deleted. The way he'd closed his eyes while listening to opera, vulnerable in a moment he thought no one was watching, deleted. The image of him feeding that stray cat, crouched down like a man capable of gentleness, deleted, deleted, deleted. She rebuilt her walls with every click. This was a job, nothing more. Santino left food outside her door. She let it go cold. On the 3rd day, she emerged because she needed coffee, and refusing to leave her room felt like letting him win. He was in the kitchen when she entered, and the sight of him, unshaven, exhausted, still wearing yesterday's shirt, sparked something she immediately crushed. Rebecca, don't. She moved past him to the espresso machine, her movements rigid. We have an event Friday night. Send me the details. I'll play my part. I'm sorry. The words stopped her cold. She turned slowly. Sorry for lying? Or sorry you got caught? Santino flinched. Actually flinched. Good. Both. That's honest at least. Rebecca poured her coffee with shaking hands. Anything else I should know? Any other secrets that might come out at an inconvenient moment? He was quiet for too long. Santino. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. What else? There's a prosecutor, he said finally, investigating my family's operations. He's been building a case for 18 months. I know. You told me. That's why you needed a respectable wife. The words tasted bitter. What I didn't tell you is that 2 weeks ago, he accepted a payment to make certain evidence disappear. Santino met her eyes. A substantial payment. The coffee cup nearly slipped from her hands. You bribed him. I protected my family. You corrupted a government official. Rebecca slammed the cup down, coffee sloshing over the rim. That's not protection. That's obstruction of justice. That's... She stopped, realization dawning cold and terrible. That's why you really needed me. Not just as an alibi. As a distraction. Something wholesome for the press to focus on while you buried evidence. It's more complicated than that. Is it? She laughed, sharp and broken. Because it sounds pretty simple. You found a journalist stupid enough to marry you. And now when investigators look into your life, they see the American photographer with the humanitarian awards instead of the crime boss bribing prosecutors. I was also protecting you. Santino's voice rose. You think marrying me just gave me cover? It gave you protection, Rebecca. My enemies can't touch you without touching me. The authorities can't pressure you for information about a husband you barely know. You're safer as Mrs. Lazzari than you ever were as Rebecca Austin. Don't you dare pretend this was for my benefit. It was for both of us. He moved closer, and she saw something raw in his expression. Desperation, maybe. Or fear. Yes, I used you. Yes, I manipulated the situation. But I also kept you alive. There are people in my world who would have killed you just for being in that gallery, for being a witness to things you didn't even know you saw. As my wife, you're untouchable. Until I'm not. Rebecca's voice went cold. Until you decide I'm not useful anymore, or until your enemies figure out I'm your weakness instead of your strength. That won't happen. You can't promise that. She grabbed her camera bag from the counter. What else haven't you told me, Santino? What other lies am I going to discover? He was silent, and that silence told her everything. There's more, she whispered. Oh God, there's more. Rebecca, tell me. Right now. All of it. Her hands trembled on the camera strap. Because I'm done with revelations. I'm done being the idiot who didn't see the con coming. Santino's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. The prosecutor isn't the only one I've paid. There are 3 judges, 2 police commissioners, a member of the European Parliament. The room spun. How many people have you bought? Enough to keep you alive, he said quietly. But maybe not enough to keep you here. The words hung between them like a challenge. Or a confession. Rebecca couldn't tell which. "I want to leave." The words came out broken. "I want to pack my things and disappear and pretend this never happened." "Then go." Santino stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the door. "I won't stop you. The money's yours regardless. Take it and run, Rebecca. While you still can." It was the escape she'd wanted since discovering the truth. Freedom. Safety. A return to the normal world where she understood the rules. But her feet didn't move. "Why aren't you trying to convince me to stay?" she asked. "Because you deserve the choice." His voice cracked. A real one this time. Not one I orchestrated or manipulated. Just a choice. Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not of legal consequences or business losses, but of her leaving. Of losing whatever fragile thing had been growing between them, real or not. "I need time," she said finally. "To think. To figure out if anything between us was genuine, or if I'm just another mark you played perfectly. Take all the time you need." She moved toward her room, then stopped at the threshold. "For what it's worth. The parts one thought were real, the coffee, the protection, the way you looked at me sometimes, those were the worst lies. Because they made me think you might actually care. Rebecca." But she was already gone, door closing on whatever he'd been about to say. Inside her room, Rebecca sank onto the bed and finally let herself feel it. The betrayal, the anger, the humiliating realization that she'd been falling for a man who'd been playing her from the start. But underneath all of it, worse than anything else, was the truth she couldn't ignore. Even knowing everything, even seeing all his lies laid bare, part of her still wanted to stay. And that terrified her more than any confession. She was packing her camera bag because she needed to get out, needed air, needed to think anywhere but here, when she heard it. Glass shattering. A shout. Then gunfire, sharp and unmistakable. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. Have you ever wanted to run from something but couldn't? Tell us what kept you frozen. Her training kicked in before conscious thought could. War zones. Riots. Active shooter protocols she'd learned covering conflicts in places where journalists wore press like armor and prayed it mattered. Get down. Stay quiet. Find cover. Rebecca dropped to the floor, crawling toward the heavy dresser. Her camera bag was within reach. Instinct made her grab it, years of muscle memory protecting equipment even in crisis. Outside her door, she heard Marco shouting in Italian, then English. Lock it down. Move. More gunfire. Closer now. Then Santino's voice, cold and sharp as a blade. Where is she? Oh God. They were here for her. Rebecca's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. No signal, someone had jammed it. She was about to try the door when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Unfamiliar. Not Marco's measured stride or Santino's confident pace. Someone else was in the penthouse. The doorknob rattled. Rebecca pressed herself against the wall, behind the dresser, making herself as small as possible. Her camera was still in her hands. Habit, training, the journalist's instinct to document even while terrified. The door exploded inward. Two men in black tactical gear, faces covered, weapons raised. Professional. Military-grade equipment. This wasn't a random break-in. This was an execution. Clear. One said in accented English. She's not here, the other replied, moving deeper into the room. Rebecca held her breath, pressed into the shadow behind the dresser. Her finger found the shutter button on her camera. Click. The sound was soft, but in the silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. Both men froze. Contact, one said into his radio. Then everything happened at once. The window behind her shattered as another man rappelled through it. Rebecca screamed, scrambling backward. The man lunged for her, grabbing her arm with brutal force. Her camera clattered to the floor, but years of instinct made her fight. Knee to groin, elbow to throat, everything she'd learned traveling alone in dangerous places. It wasn't enough. He was bigger, trained, and he lifted her like she weighed nothing. Got her, he said into his radio. Extracting now. The door frame exploded in splinters. Santino stood there, and Rebecca barely recognized him. This wasn't the man who brought her coffee or fed stray cats. This was something else entirely. Something carved from violence and rage, a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. He fired twice. Both men in the room dropped before they could turn their weapons. The man holding Rebecca used her as a shield, gun pressed to her temple. Back off, Lazzari, or she dies. Then you die with her, Santino said calmly, his gun never wavering. Your choice. Santino, Rebecca's voice cracked. Close your eyes, Amore. His eyes never left her captor. Don't watch this. She didn't close them. Couldn't. She watched as Santino moved like liquid death, fast enough that she almost missed it. One shot, the man's shoulder, making him flinch, his grip loosening just enough. Rebecca dropped and rolled as Santino fired again. The man hit the ground. Silence fell, broken only by her ragged breathing and the ringing in her ears from gunfire in an enclosed space. Rebecca. Santino was suddenly there, hands on her face, her shoulders, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Did they? I'm fine. But she wasn't. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. What? Who? We need to move. Now. He pulled her to her feet, and that's when she saw it. Blood on his shirt. Not his own. He was checking her for injuries while covered in someone else's blood. Marco appeared in the doorway. Buildings secure. 4 down. 1 got away. Find him. Santino's voice was lethal. And find out who sent them. Already on it. Rebecca let Santino guide her out of the room, too numb to resist. The penthouse looked like a war zone. Shattered glass everywhere. Bullet holes in walls that had been pristine that morning. Bodies in the hallway, faces she'd never see clearly because Santino kept her moving, kept her from looking too closely at what he'd done. What he'd done to protect her. He led her to his study, the one room that seemed untouched, and locked the door behind them. Only then did he let go of her, moving to a cabinet and pulling out a bottle of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses with steady hands, handed her one. Drink. She did, and the burn helped anchor her to reality. They were here for me. Yes. Because of you. Because I'm your weakness. The words from Isabel's warning echoed. They wanted leverage. They wanted to hurt me. Santino downed his own whiskey in 1 swallow. And they knew exactly how to do it. Rebecca looked at him. Really looked at him. Blood on his shirt, gun still in his hand. 3 men dead in his home, and his only concern had been her safety. Everything she'd been feeling before, the anger, the betrayal, the walls she'd rebuilt, cracked in the face of this undeniable truth. He would kill for her. Had killed for her. You were right, she whispered. About protecting me. If I wasn't your wife, you'd be dead. His voice was flat. Or worse, used as a message to me, then disposed of. They would have made it hurt, Rebecca. Made it slow. He set down his glass with controlled violence. That's why I lied. Why I manipulated you into this marriage. Because the moment you photographed that gallery, the moment you were seen talking to me, you became a target. You knew this would happen. I knew it was possible. He finally met her eyes. And I did it anyway. Because I'm selfish. Because I needed you more than I cared about your safety. Because I'm exactly the monster you think I am. Rebecca's hands were still shaking. Her camera bag sat at her feet. She'd somehow grabbed it during the chaos. Muscle memory. Survival instinct. The same instinct that made her reach for it now, pulling out her camera. The screen showed the last photo she'd taken. One of the masked men mid-motion, a split second before Santino had appeared in the doorway. The image was sharp, clear, damning. Evidence of an attack. Of attempted kidnapping. Of the violence that lived in Santino's world. She clicked through to the next image. One she didn't remember taking, caught by accident as she'd fought. It showed Santino in the doorway, gun raised, his face transformed into something terrifying and beautiful and absolutely lethal. A killer, captured in perfect focus. And in that frozen moment, with blood on the walls and bodies in the hallway and her hands still trembling, Rebecca understood something that should have terrified her, but instead felt inevitable. She was in love with him. Not despite what he was. Not ignoring his violence or his lies. But seeing all of it, the manipulation, the murders, the man who'd orchestrated her life and then killed to preserve it, and loving him anyway. It was the worst possible realization at the worst possible moment. I should leave, she said, her voice breaking. I should run and never look back. Yes, Santino agreed. You should. But I can't. The confession tore out of her. Because even knowing everything, even seeing what you just did, she couldn't finish. Couldn't say it out loud. Santino moved toward her slowly, like approaching something wild and wounded. Rebecca, don't. She held up a hand, stopping him. Don't say anything. Don't make promises you can't keep. Just tell me the truth. One truth. Was any of it real? He stopped inches away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the blood spattered on his collar, the way his hands trembled slightly before he fisted them. All of it, he said quietly. Every morning I brought you coffee. Every time I looked at you and forgot why I'd started this. Every moment I realized I'd do anything, bribe anyone, kill everyone, to keep you safe. His voice dropped to a whisper. I married you for strategy. But I'd kill for you because I fell in love with a woman who sees monsters and photographs them anyway. The world tilted. Rebecca closed the distance between them and kissed him. Not gently. Not carefully, but with all the fear and anger and impossible love she'd been trying to deny. He tasted like whiskey and violence, and when his arms wrapped around her, still bloodstained, still deadly, she felt safer than she had in months. It was wrong. Impossible. The worst decision she'd ever made. But God help her, it felt real. They stood there in the wreckage of his study, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Outside, Marco's voice echoed through the penthouse, coordinating cleanup, making calls, erasing evidence of what had happened here. This was Santino's world. Violence and cover-ups, blood and consequences. And Rebecca had just chosen to stay in it. "We should talk about this," Santino said against her lips. Later, Rebecca pulled back, reality crashing in. "Right now, we need to figure out who sent them." His eyes darkened with something like pride. Always the journalist. Always. She grabbed her camera, scrolling through the photos again. "I got one of their faces. Before you." She stopped, the weight of what he'd done settling over her. "Before you killed them. Rebecca." "I know." She met his eyes. "I know what you did. What you had to do. I'm not naive enough to think there was another way." But she also wasn't naive enough to think she could unsee it. The body in her doorway. The efficient brutality of how Santino had moved. The blood. She'd fallen in love with a killer. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like the truest thing in her life. "Show Marco the photo," Santino said, "all business now. He'll run it through our contacts. Someone will know who they work for. And then we make sure they never come for you again." The promise in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel something she'd been searching for her entire life. Chosen. Protected. Seen. Even if the man doing the protecting had blood on his hands. If this story has your heart racing, just wait. Because what Rebecca finds next will change everything. The truth about why those men came for her. The choice she'll have to make between love and survival. And the moment she realizes that walking away from Santino Lazzari might be the most dangerous decision of all. Hit subscribe if you want more real stories that feel like movies. Because this one is far from over. Rebecca left 3 days later. Not because Santino asked her to. Not because he tried to push her away or make it easier. He did the opposite, held her closer, touched her like she was something precious, kissed her like a man trying to memorize every moment before it disappeared. But she left anyway. Because love wasn't enough to survive what was coming. Marco had identified the attackers. Hired contractors from Montenegro, professionals who took jobs from anyone with enough money. The client remained anonymous, protected by layers of cutouts and cryptocurrency payments. Someone with resources wanted her dead or captured, and they'd be back. "I can protect you," Santino had insisted that final morning. "I know." Rebecca zipped her camera bag, the same one she'd carried through war zones and refugee camps. But for how long? Until the next attack? The one after that? "I'm not built for this life, Santino. I'm not built to be someone's target. Then I'll eliminate the threat. By killing how many people?" She turned to face him. 5, 10. Where does it end? At what point does protecting me turn me into someone I don't recognize? He had no answer for that. So she kissed him one last time, gentle, final, tasting like goodbye, and walked away from the most dangerous thing she'd ever loved. The flight to London was half empty. Rebecca spent it staring at her camera, scrolling through months of photographs she'd never publish. Santino laughing. Santino working. Santino looking at her like she was the only real thing in his manufactured world. Evidence of a love that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. She deleted nothing this time. Her London flat was exactly as she'd left it. Small, cheap, safe in its anonymity. No penthouse views. No silk sheets. No coffee delivered by a man who'd studied her for months just to know how she liked it. Rebecca told herself this was better. This was real life, the one she understood. She almost believed it. The first week back, she threw herself into work. Pitched stories to editors who'd forgotten she existed. Processed old photographs. Pretended her life in Paris had been nothing but a strange interlude, already fading into unreality. The second week, she noticed the man across the street. Different faces, same energy. Someone was watching her flat. The third week, her editor at The Guardian called with an unusual request. "Someone's been asking about you. Says they're writing a profile. Wants to know about your recent work." I told them nothing, but Rebecca, be careful. Something felt off. The fourth week, she found the note slipped under her door. "You have something that belongs to someone important. Return it or face consequences." No signature. No explanation of what it was. But Rebecca knew. Months of photographs. Evidence of Santino's world, his operations, his humanity. Someone thought she'd documented something worth killing for. She called the only number she'd kept from Paris. Not Santino's. She didn't trust herself to hear his voice. Gianna's. His sister, the one person who'd been kind without agenda. Rebecca. Gianna sounded surprised. I heard you left. I did. But someone followed me here. Rebecca kept her voice low, paranoid now about who might be listening. Someone wants the photographs. A pause. Then, what photographs? I don't know. That's the problem. I have hundreds from my time there. I don't know what I captured that's worth threatening me over. Send them to me. All of them. I'll have our people look. I can't. If I send them, I lose my only leverage. Then you have a choice to make. Gianna's voice turned hard. Come back to Paris. Let us protect you. Or stay in London and hope you figure out what they want before they decide to stop asking nicely. There's a third option, which is disappear. Rebecca had already researched it. Cash-only hostels in Eastern Europe. Countries with weak extradition. She'd done it before, could do it again. Change my name, delete the photographs, start over somewhere no one knows to look for Rebecca Austin or Rebecca Lazzari. You'd be running forever. Better than dying. Gianna was quiet for a long moment. He asks about you. Every day. Tries to pretend he doesn't care, but Marco says he's like a ghost. Goes through the motions, handles business, but something's missing. Rebecca's chest tightened. Don't. I'm just telling you what I see. My brother is many things, most of them terrible. But the way he looked at you? That was real, Rebecca. Maybe the only real thing in his life. Real doesn't mean safe. No, Gianna agreed. But maybe it means worth fighting for. The call ended. Rebecca sat in her tiny flat, surrounded by equipment and memories, and tried to figure out what to do with a love that could get her killed. She made it 2 more weeks. 2 weeks of watching over her shoulder, of sleeping with a knife under her pillow, of seeing threats in every shadow. 2 weeks of not calling Santino, of not flying back to Paris, of trying to convince herself that survival mattered more than love. Then the price on her head went public. She found out from a journalist friend, someone who moved in the same circles as people who knew people. Rebecca, there's talk. Darknet forums, encrypted channels. Someone's offering serious money for information about you. Location, habits, vulnerabilities. You need to disappear. Today. But you don't disappear from people with the resources to find anyone. Rebecca knew that. She'd documented enough manhunts, enough targeted killings, to understand how this ended. She could run. She could hide. She could change her name and her face and her entire life. Or she could choose the man who'd already killed to keep her safe. Rebecca booked a flight to Prague instead. Neutral ground. Somewhere to think without London's suffocating surveillance. She'd decide there. Away from both threats and temptation. The decision was made for her at the airport. She was waiting to board when she noticed him. Expensive suit, cold eyes, moving through the terminal with purpose. He made eye contact for just a second too long. Recognition. Confirmation. Rebecca ran. Through the terminal, past security who shouted but didn't follow, into a bathroom where she locked herself in a stall with shaking hands and called the number she'd sworn she wouldn't. Santino answered on the first ring. Rebecca. They found me. Her voice cracked. At the airport. I ran, but I don't know how long. Where are you? Heathrow. Terminal 5. Women's bathroom near gate. Stay there. I'm sending people. Santino. Stay alive, amore. I'm coming for you. The call ended. Rebecca sat on a closed toilet seat in a London airport bathroom, camera bag clutched to her chest, and waited to see if love was stronger than the forces trying to kill her. Have you ever run from something only to realize you were running toward something worse? Drop your story below. Santino's people got her out within an hour. 2 men in airport security uniforms who weren't airport security, moving her through restricted areas and into a car that drove like rules didn't exist. They took her to a safe house in Chelsea, not luxurious, just secure, and told her to wait. She waited 3 days. 3 days of Marco checking in via encrypted calls. 3 days of learning that the price on her head had come from someone inside Santino's organization. A rival family member who wanted leverage, who'd figured out that the quickest way to destroy Santino Lazzari was to destroy what he loved. He's handling it, Marco said, his tone making it clear that handling meant violence she didn't want details about. When can I see him? When it's safe. But safe never came. On the 4th day, Rebecca was reviewing her photographs again, still trying to figure out what she'd captured that was worth all this. When Gianna called, the sister who'd been kind, who'd warned her, who'd told her that what Santino felt was real. Now she was crying. Gianna. Rebecca's stomach dropped. What happened? It's Santino. The words came between sobs. There was an ambush. A meeting that was supposed to be neutral ground. He's been shot, Rebecca. Multiple times. He's in surgery now, but the doctors, her voice broke completely. They don't know if he'll make it. The world stopped. Rebecca heard herself asking questions. Where, when, how bad, but the answers didn't matter. Only one thing mattered. Santino was dying, and she wasn't there. Where is he? Private clinic. Outside Paris. But Rebecca, you can't come here. It's not safe. The people who did this, they're still looking for you. If you show up, where is he? Gianna gave her the address. Rebecca grabbed her passport and camera bag, the only things that mattered, and was out the door before anyone could stop her. Marco tried calling. She ignored it. The safe house guards tried blocking her exit. She told them she'd scream until police came, and they let her pass. She made it to Paris in 4 hours, pushing every speed limit, burning through money she didn't have on taxis and favors and bribes. The clinic was disguised as a country estate, the kind of place where powerful people went to die or be saved away from prying eyes. Security stopped her at the gate. "I'm his wife," Rebecca said, the words feeling true for the first time. "Rebecca Lazari. Let me through." They made a call, checked her ID against some list, finally nodded and opened the gates. Inside, the clinic looked more like a luxury hotel with medical equipment. Gianna met her in the foyer, elegant even in crisis, but with red-rimmed eyes and hands that shook when she hugged Rebecca. "He's out of surgery," Gianna said. "Stable but critical. 2 bullets to the chest, 1 to the abdomen. He lost so much blood, Rebecca. They almost lost him twice on the table. Can I see him?" The doctor said family only, but she managed a broken smile. "Your family. Legally. Technically. However you want to define it." Rebecca followed her through pristine hallways to a private room. The door was guarded by 2 of Santino's men, both armed, both looking like they'd kill anyone who tried to enter without permission. They stepped aside for her. Nothing could have prepared Rebecca for what she saw. Santino lay in a hospital bed that looked too small for him, attached to machines that beeped his survival in steady rhythms. His face was pale, drained of the color she'd memorized. Bandages covered his chest, spotted with blood that had seeped through, and 4 dripped clear fluid into his arm, and a breathing tube ran to his nose. He looked fragile, breakable, human in a way she'd never seen him. Rebecca's legs gave out. She caught herself on the door frame, willing herself not to fall apart. Not here. Not when he needed her to be strong. "He's been asking for you," Gianna said quietly from behind her, "since he woke up from surgery, before they sedated him again. Where is she? Is she safe?" Those were his first words. Rebecca moved to the bedside, her hands trembling as she reached for his, the only part of him not wrapped in bandages or hooked to machines. His skin was cool. Too cool. "You idiot," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "You absolute idiot. You were supposed to stay alive. You were supposed to be untouchable. But no one was untouchable. Not even Santino Lazari." The doctor came in, an older woman with efficient movements and kind eyes. She checked Santino's vitals, made notes on a tablet, then turned to Rebecca. "You're the wife." "Yes. He's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. The bullets damaged his lung and nicked his liver. We stopped the bleeding, but there could be complications. Infection. Internal bleeding we missed. Organ failure." She said it clinically, but Rebecca heard the subtext. He might still die. "Can he hear me?" "The sedation is light. He should be able to hear, even if he can't respond. Talk to him. It might help." The doctor left. Gianna squeezed Rebecca's shoulder once, then followed, closing the door behind her. Rebecca was alone with the man she'd run from, the man she'd tried to stop loving, the man who'd been shot protecting what they'd built together. She pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand in both of hers. "Santino." Her voice cracked. "I don't know if you can hear me. The doctor says you can, so I'm going to believe her. Because I need you to hear this." She took a shaky breath. "I ran. I left you in Paris and convinced myself it was the right choice. The safe choice. The choice that would keep me alive." Rebecca laughed, bitter and broken. "But I was wrong. Because alive without you? That's not living. That's just surviving. And I'm so tired of just surviving." A machine beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance. "I have all these photographs," she continued. "Months of images I was supposed to use to expose you. To build my career on documenting how terrible you are. But you know what I see when I look at them now? I see the man who brought me coffee, who fed stray cats, who killed to keep me safe, who asked if I was okay before asking if his attackers were dead. She squeezed his hand, desperate for any response. None came. "So here's what I'm going to do," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. "I'm going to sit here and wait for you to wake up. And when you do, because you will, you stubborn bastard, I'm going to tell you that I love you. That I choose you. That 6 months isn't enough, and I want more. I want years. I want whatever time we can steal from this violent, impossible world." She brought his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles. "But you have to wake up first. You have to survive this. Because I didn't run all the way to Paris, past everyone trying to stop me, just to watch you die. So fight, Santino. Fight like you fought for me. Fight like what we have is worth staying alive for." The machines continued their steady beeping. His eyes stayed closed. But Rebecca thought, maybe imagined, that his fingers twitched against hers. A whisper of pressure. A promise of return. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not this time. Not ever. So you better wake up soon, because I have a lot more to say to you." Rebecca settled into the chair, her hand still holding his, and began the vigil that would either end in reunion or devastating loss. Outside, Paris waited. Inside, love fought death for the right to one more sunrise. She didn't leave his side for 36 hours. Gianna brought food Rebecca barely touched. Marco updated her on security. The men who'd shot Santino were dead, their employer still unknown but being hunted. The doctor checked vitals every 4 hours, her expression carefully neutral in that way medical professionals perfected when outcomes were uncertain. Rebecca cataloged every beep, every breath, every flicker of his eyelids that might mean consciousness returning. She talked to him constantly, about nothing, about everything. About the photographs she'd taken. About the coffee he'd brought her every morning. About how she'd been an idiot to run. "You have terrible timing," she told him on the second night, exhausted and running on nothing but espresso and fear. "I finally figure out I love you, and you decide to get shot. Very dramatic. Very you." His hand was warmer now. That had to mean something. "The doctor says your lung is healing. Your liver too. You're stable, Santino. You just need to wake up. Come back." Her voice cracked. "Come back to me." Nothing. Rebecca rested her forehead against his hand, tears soaking into the hospital sheets. This was worse than the attack, worse than running, worse than anything. At least then she'd had choices. Now all she could do was wait and pray to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. "Please," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve to ask. I know I ran when I should have stayed. But please, not like this. Don't let it end like this." The machines beeped their steady rhythm. His chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance. And then, his fingers twitched against hers. Rebecca's head snapped up. "Santino." Another twitch. Deliberate this time. His eyelids fluttered, fighting toward consciousness through layers of sedation. "Doctor," Rebecca called, not taking her eyes off him. "He's waking up." The medical team rushed in, checking monitors, adjusting IVs, doing things Rebecca didn't understand but trusted meant hope. The doctor shone a light in Santino's eyes, asked him to squeeze her hand, tracked his responses with professional calm. "Mr. Lazzari, can you hear me?" A groan. Rough, pained, but unmistakably alive. "Don't try to talk yet. You have a breathing tube. I'm going to remove it, but you need to stay calm. Nod if you understand." The smallest nod. His eyes, those dark eyes Rebecca had memorized, finally opened fully. Unfocused at first, scanning the room with the wariness of someone who'd survived an ambush. Then they found her. Everything else in his expression was confusion and pain. But when he saw Rebecca, something shifted. Softened. Recognized. The doctor worked quickly, removing tubes, adjusting oxygen. "You were shot 3 times, Mr. Lazzari. You're in a private clinic outside Paris. You've been unconscious for 48 hours. Your prognosis is good, but you need to rest." Santino didn't look at the doctor. His eyes stayed locked on Rebecca as she moved closer, her hand finding his again. "Rebecca." His voice was destroyed, barely a whisper. But he said her name like a prayer answered. "I'm here." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm right here. You came." Each word seemed to cost him. "Not safe. You shouldn't." "Shut up." She laughed through her tears. "You don't get to almost die and then lecture me about safety." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn. You're one to talk." The doctor cleared her throat diplomatically. 5 minutes. Then he needs to rest. His body has been through severe trauma. The medical team filed out, leaving them alone. Rebecca pulled her chair closer, both hands wrapped around his now. "You scared me," she whispered. "When Gianna called, when she said you might not make it," her voice broke. "I've photographed death, Santino. I've seen it up close more times than I can count. But the thought of you dying, of never seeing you again, of all the things I never got to say. You're here now." His thumb brushed weakly across her knuckles. "That's all that matters." "I ran," Rebecca said, needing him to hear this. "I was a coward and I ran. You were smart. Stayed alive." "No. I was scared. Scared of what you made me feel. Scared of choosing you meant losing myself." She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching his. "But being without you? That wasn't living. That was just surviving. And I'm done just surviving." Something vulnerable flickered across Santino's face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came easier the second time. "I love you, and I choose you, and 6 months isn't enough. I want more. I want years. I want whatever time we can steal from this violent, impossible world." His eyes closed, and for a terrifying moment she thought she'd lost him again. Then she heard it, a sound between a laugh and a sob, muffled by pain and emotion. "You weren't supposed to stay," he whispered, opening his eyes. They were wet now, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "When I made that deal, when I married you, I knew you'd leave eventually. Smart women always do. I told myself 6 months would be enough. That I'd take what I could get and let you go when it was time. Santino. But then you stayed past the fear. You stayed through the truth. You saw everything I am, all the violence, all the lies, and you looked at me like I was worth saving." His voice cracked completely. "You weren't supposed to stay. But I prayed you would. Every morning. Every night. I prayed you would." Rebecca kissed him then, carefully, mindful of his injuries, but with all the love and fear and relief she'd been holding back. He tasted like antiseptic and survival, and when she pulled back, they were both crying. "I'm staying," she promised. "For real this time. No running. No doubts. I'm staying, and we're going to figure out how to make this work. It won't be easy." Exhaustion was pulling at him, the brief burst of consciousness fading. "There are still threats. Still enemies. Still." "I know." Rebecca smoothed his hair back, gentle. "But we'll face them together. That's how this works now. Together." His eyes were closing, the sedation and trauma pulling him back under. But his hand tightened around hers one more time. "I love you," he whispered. "In case I didn't say it. In case I don't wake up again. You will. You're going to wake up, and you're going to heal, and we're going to have a lifetime of arguments about who's more stubborn." The smallest smile. "You are. Definitely you. Rebecca. Sleep, Santino. I'll be here when you wake up. I promise." His breathing evened out, peaceful now instead of labored. The monitors showed steady vitals, the crisis passing into recovery. Rebecca sat back in her chair, still holding his hand, and felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Not the desperate, fleeting kind, but the solid, stubborn kind that survived bullets and betrayal and the long road ahead. They had a future now. Uncertain, complicated, probably dangerous. But theirs. Have you ever realized you loved someone only when you almost lost them? Tell us your story in the comments below. Recovery was slower than either of them wanted and faster than the doctors expected. Santino was stubborn about healing the way he was stubborn about everything. Pushing through pain, ignoring limits, trying to work from his hospital bed until Rebecca threatened to hide his phone. Marco smuggled in encrypted laptops anyway, and she found Santino reviewing financial documents with one hand while the other was still hooked to Infor. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, closing the laptop despite his protest. "The family doesn't rest because I got shot. The family can survive without you for a few weeks." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Your sister is handling things. Marco is handling things. You need to handle healing. Gianna is too soft. Marco is too cautious. And you're too stubborn." She sat on the edge of his bed, carefully avoiding his bandaged torso. "But since we're having this argument, let me ask you something. What happens when you're healed? When we leave this clinic and go back to Paris? What world am I walking back into?" Santino was quiet for a long moment. "The same one you left. That's what I'm afraid of." He studied her face, reading the conflict there. "You want me to change. I want us to have a future that doesn't involve armed men breaking into our home every few months." Rebecca's voice softened. "I'm not naive, Santino. I know you can't just walk away from your family's business. But I also can't spend the rest of my life wondering if today's the day someone finally succeeds in killing you. So what are you asking?" "I'm asking if there's a way out. Not all at once. Not overnight. But gradually. Legitimately." She took his hand. "You're smart enough to have built an empire. You're smart enough to transform it into something that won't get us killed. It's not that simple. I know. But is it possible?" Santino closed his eyes, and she could see him calculating risks, costs, loyalties, betrayals. When he opened them again, something had shifted. My grandfather started this family with a bakery, he said quietly. Did you know that? A legitimate bakery in Naples. The criminal side came later, when he couldn't pay protection money to the local gangs. So he became the gang. He squeezed her hand. I've spent my whole life protecting what he built. But maybe it's time to remember what he built it from. Meaning I have legitimate businesses mixed in with everything else. Real estate, restaurants, import companies that actually import legal goods. A bitter smile. The criminal operations are profitable, but they're also what keeps me looking over my shoulder. What got me shot? What put you in danger? Rebecca's heart began to beat faster. You're actually considering this. I'm considering that I want to live long enough to annoy you for decades. He pulled her closer, ignoring the pain it caused. I'm considering that my wife asked me to build something different, and I've never been able to deny you anything. Your wife is very demanding. My wife is worth it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they were discussing settling between them. This wasn't a simple choice. Walking away from organized crime meant betraying loyalties, making enemies of former allies, risking everything on the hope that legitimacy could be achieved. But staying meant blood and bullets, and living under constant threat. It won't be quick, Santino said finally. I'll need to transfer operations, sell off certain ventures, restructure leadership. A year, maybe 2. And even then, there will be people who see it as weakness. Who'll come for me anyway. Then we'll deal with them. Together. You make it sound simple. It's not. Rebecca met his eyes. But you know what? I didn't come back to Paris for simple. I came back for you. For us. For the chance to build something real instead of just documenting other people's realities. Santino was quiet, processing. Then, the real estate holdings alone are worth 20 million euros. Clean money, legitimate investments. We could build from there. Sell off the restaurants at fair value. Establish partnerships with actual legal entities instead of fronts for laundering. You've already thought about this. I've thought about it since you left. His voice dropped. Every day you were gone, I asked myself what I'd give up to get you back. The answer was everything. The question was whether I'd survive giving it up. And now I think survival looks different than I thought. Maybe it's not about being the biggest threat in the room. Maybe it's about being boring enough that threats forget you exist. Rebecca laughed despite everything. Santino Lazzari, boring businessman. I can't picture it. Neither can I. But I'm willing to try. He touched her face, gentle despite the lingering weakness in his hands. You saved me, Rebecca. Not with a camera or documentation. Not even with love, though that helped. You saved me by making me want something more than power. You made me want a life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and uncertainty. It's going to be dangerous, she warned. The transition. Some of your people won't understand. Some will see it as betrayal. I know. We might lose everything. As long as I don't lose you, I can live with that. Rebecca kissed him then, carefully but thoroughly, sealing the promise they were making to each other. When she pulled back, Santino was smiling, genuinely smiling, not the calculated expression he wore in business, but something real and unguarded. So we're really doing this? She asked. Building something legitimate? Something that won't require armed guards and bulletproof glass. We're really doing this. He settled back against the pillows, exhausted but determined. Though I'm keeping Marco. He makes excellent coffee. Deal. Over the following weeks, as Santino healed, Rebecca watched him make calls that must have cost him everything. He met with family members in the clinic's secure conference room, emerging each time looking older but somehow lighter. He transferred operations to cousins who could stomach the violence he was walking away from. He sold businesses at losses just to be free of them. Gianna supported him. About time, she said when he told her. I was tired of wondering if every phone call would be about your funeral. Marco was quieter in his approval, but Rebecca caught him watching Santino with something like respect. Takes strength to walk away, he said once. More than staying ever did. By the time Santino was discharged 2 months later, the Lazzari family looked completely different on paper. The criminal empire was dismantled, sold, transferred. What remained was boring and legitimate. Property management companies, legally operating restaurants, investment portfolios that could be audited without finding bodies. It wasn't complete. There were still threads that would take time to cut, still people who owed favors or held grudges. But it was a start. The night they returned to the penthouse, newly secured with systems that didn't require armed guards, Rebecca found Santino on the balcony where the stray cat still visited. Do you regret it? She asked, joining him. Which part? Any of it. Marrying me drunk in a civil ceremony. Making the deal. Leaving behind everything you built. Santino pulled her against him, still moving carefully around healing ribs. I regret not meeting you sooner. I regret that it took getting shot for me to realize what mattered. But marrying you? Loving you? Choosing a boring life with you over an exciting one alone. He kissed her temple. Never. Good answer. I'm learning. They stood there as Paris lit up below them. Two people who'd found each other through manipulation and stayed through choice. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in either of their lives, uncertain felt like possibility instead of threat. I love you, Rebecca said. I know, Santino replied. You risked everything to tell me. Worth it. Always. The first year wasn't a fairy tale. Leaving the criminal world didn't mean the criminal world left them. There were whispers in the dark corners of Paris. Lazari went soft. His wife made him weak. Easy target now. 3 times in 6 months, threats materialized into something real. An attempt to burn down one of their legitimate restaurants. A brick through the penthouse window with a note. Traders pay eventually. A former associate who cornered Rebecca outside a gallery opening, his breath wine sour as he hissed. You ruined him. Marco was always there. And Santino, despite his promises of legitimacy, still kept a gun in the bedside table. This is what I meant, Rebecca said after the gallery incident, her hands still shaking hours later. We traded one danger for another. We traded certainty for possibility, Santino corrected, pulling her close. The old way, I knew exactly what threats to expect. This way, I don't know. But I'm also not the one creating them anymore. It was a fine distinction when you were still looking over your shoulder. But there were good days too. Days when Santino's limp from the bullet wounds was barely noticeable. Days when Rebecca's photographs, now focused on rebuilding communities, legitimate businesses rising from criminal ashes. One award she could actually accept publicly. Days when they were just 2 people having coffee on a balcony, feeding a cat that had become less stray and more theirs. Do you miss it? She asked him once. The power. The fear you commanded. Santino considered this, stirring sugar into his espresso. I missed the certainty. Knowing where I stood, who my enemies were. But the person I was then. He met her eyes. He couldn't have loved you the way I do now. He wouldn't have known how. So I'm a very expensive therapy program. You're the most expensive thing I never knew I needed. The jokes helped. But so did the truth between them, hard-won and constantly maintained. They'd both traded something for this life. Rebecca her objectivity, her distance, her safety net of escape. Santino his empire, his legacy, his identity as someone untouchable. What they got in return was each other. Complicated, damaged, stubbornly hopeful. Not safety, never safety, but something real. The decision to renew their vows came from Gianna, surprisingly. You should do it properly, she said over dinner at their new restaurant, legitimately profitable now, no backroom deals required. The first time was drunk and strategic. This time should be about choice. We choose each other every day, Rebecca protested. Then make it official. Show the world, show yourselves, that this isn't the arrangement anymore. It's the life you're building. So on a crisp October afternoon, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Rebecca had rushed to Santino's hospital bedside, they stood in a small church in Montmartre. No official this time, but a priest who didn't ask questions. No witnesses except Gianna, Marco, and the stray cat Rebecca insisted on bringing because she's family now. Rebecca wore a simple dress, cream-colored and elegant. Santino wore a suit that hid the scars beneath. His hand shook slightly when he slid a new ring onto her finger. Not his grandmother's diamond this time, but something they'd chosen together. Simple platinum, engraved inside with coordinates. The exact spot on the balcony where they fed the cat, where they had coffee, where they'd rebuilt themselves into something new. I should probably have better vows prepared, Santino said when it was his turn to speak. Something romantic, poetic, but the truth is simpler than that. He took both her hands. You saw the worst of me and decided I was worth the risk. You stayed when leaving would have been smarter. You chose me when you could have chosen safety. His voice caught. I don't deserve you, Rebecca. But I promised to spend every day trying to. Rebecca's turn. She'd written vows, revised them a dozen times, but standing there, they felt inadequate. So she spoke from the heart instead. A year ago, I thought marriage was a trap. A deal that went wrong. A mistake I'd spend 6 months correcting. She smiled through tears. I was so stupid. Because this marriage, messy and dangerous and nothing like I planned, is the first thing in my life that feels completely right. She squeezed his hands. I choose you, Santino. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because loving you feels like finally understanding what it means to be alive. The priest pronounced them married, again, for real this time. and when Santino kissed her, it felt like both an ending and a beginning. The strategic arrangement buried, the real marriage born. Outside, Paris sprawled in autumn colors. Somewhere in the city, there were still people who wished them harm. Still shadows that remembered what Santino had been. Still dangers that came with trading one life for another. But walking out of that church, Rebecca's hand in Santino's, she understood something fundamental. She hadn't traded danger for love. She'd traded meaningless danger for danger that meant everything. The difference wasn't safety. It was purpose. And when they renewed their vows that October afternoon, standing before God and family and one very patient cat, it wasn't fake anymore. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't an arrangement. It was just two people who'd found each other in the worst way possible and chosen to build something impossibly good from the wreckage. Have you ever taken a risk on love that everyone said was crazy? Tell us about it below. Today, they live just outside Paris, in a renovated farmhouse that's close enough to the city for Rebecca's gallery openings, but far enough that the silence at night feels earned. The property has gardens that Santino tends with surprising patience, and a studio where Rebecca processes photographs that now win awards without pseudonyms. Santino still walks with a limp, especially in winter, especially when it rains. The bullets damage things that never fully heal. Some mornings, Rebecca watches him move slowly through stretches the physical therapist prescribed, his body remembering violence even as he tries to forget it. She doesn't say anything, just brings him coffee, 2 sugars, the way he likes it, and kisses the scar on his shoulder that came closest to his heart. The cat, officially named Paris now, because they're both sentimental, has her own room. Spoiled doesn't begin to cover it. Marco retired but visits monthly, always staying for dinner, always checking sight lines out of habit. Gianna runs the restaurant group now, legitimate and thriving. She's talking about opening a location in Rome, and Rebecca has promised to document the launch. The penthouse in Paris they kept, but rented out to visiting artists through a program Rebecca started. She likes the idea of that space, where everything began, where blood was spilled, where she almost lost him, being filled with creativity now instead of danger. The threats didn't disappear entirely. Last year, someone left flowers at their gate with a note, "Remember who you were." Santino called old contacts, made quiet arrangements, and the flowers stopped coming. Rebecca doesn't ask for details. Some truths are better left unphotographed. But mostly, their life is beautifully boring. Farmer's market on Saturdays. Dinner with Gianna on Sundays. Rebecca teaching photography workshops at a local community center. Santino on the board of a nonprofit that helps former criminals transition to legitimate work, using his story, carefully edited, as proof that change is possible. They argue about small things now. Whose turn it is to feed Paris. Whether the living room needs repainting. If Rebecca's spending too much time in the darkroom. Normal arguments. The kind that don't involve guns or betrayal, or wondering if today's the day everything falls apart. On their anniversaries, Rebecca wears the red slip. The one from that first morning, when she woke up married to a stranger in a penthouse overlooking Notre Dame. Santino keeps it in tissue paper in his closet, like it's a museum piece. Like it represents the moment his life divided into before and after. "You look terrified in this," he said once, holding the delicate fabric. "I was terrified," Rebecca admitted. "Of you. Of myself. Of what I was agreeing to. And now I'm just terrified you'll stretch it out when you inevitably try to." He'd kissed her before she could finish, and the slip had ended up on the floor anyway, carefully retrieved in the morning. Their wedding photo, the real one, from the church in Montmartre, sits on the mantel. But the video from that first drunken ceremony, the one that started everything, that stays locked in a safe. Some evidence isn't meant for the world. Rebecca's gallery had asked once about doing a retrospective of her Paris period. They wanted the gritty images, the ones she'd captured during her months documenting Santino's world. She'd refused. "Why?" the curator had asked, confused. "Those photographs are your best work. Raw. Unflinching. The story is incredible." "Because that story isn't mine to tell," Rebecca had replied. "Not anymore." The truth was simpler. Those photographs showed a man transforming. A killer becoming human. A criminal becoming legitimate. A strategic marriage becoming love. They were too intimate, too true, too much of her heart exposed in every frame. Some stories were too real to print. She kept them, though. In a leather portfolio in her studio, she and Santino sometimes looked through them together. Evidence of who they'd been, what they'd survived, how far they'd come. "Look how miserable you look here," Rebecca said once, pointing to an image of Santino at a business meeting, his face carved from stone. "I was miserable. You were in the room, and I couldn't touch you. Worst meeting of my life. You'd literally just killed someone the week before. Still worse than not being able to hold your hand. She laughed, but she understood. The photographs documented a love story backwards, starting at the end and working toward the beginning. Each image showed walls coming down, piece by piece. Manipulation becoming authenticity. Fear becoming trust. The final photograph in the collection was one Marco had taken without them knowing. Santino and Rebecca on the balcony, feeding Paris, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Nothing dramatic. Just two people existing together. That was the image that told the real story. Not the danger or the passion or the dramatic transformation. Just the quiet moment after. The life they'd built from the ruins of who they'd been. Some nights, when Paris was asleep and the farmhouse was quiet, Rebecca and Santino sat in the garden with wine and comfortable silence. They didn't talk about the past much anymore. Didn't need to. It was written in every scar, every photograph, every choice that had led them here. Do you ever regret it? Rebecca asked once, because even now she needed to know. Santino didn't hesitate. Not even once. Not even the getting shot part. Especially not that. It brought you back. She'd kissed him then, tasting wine and truth, and the particular flavor of a love that had survived everything it shouldn't have. Because some stories were too dangerous to live. Some loves were too complicated to explain. Some marriages started as lies and became the most honest thing in two broken people's lives. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very stubborn and very willing to risk everything for something real, you got to keep the stranger you woke up married to. Not because the law said you had to, but because your heart finally learned how to choose.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.